John King, USA, CNN, weeknights 7 Eastern.
President Obama is just back from a NATO summit that agreed to draw down international forces in Afghanistan between next year and 2014, but also promised a long-term partnership with Afghanistan's government. The problem, and it's a big one, is a new survey of the Afghan people shows many are not only hostile toward the international community, they don't know why the American troops are there. With me is Noreen McDonald, who not only heads up the group responsible for that survey, she's in Washington to advise the White House on Afghan policy. I want to start with the numbers because, frankly, they're stunning 9 years into the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan. You showed this group of Afghan men these pictures. You can see them over your shoulder there, and every American has seen these pictures too many times, the planes hitting the Twin Towers on 9/11. And you asked this very simple question. Do you recognize this picture? 68% said yes. So they had some awareness of these photos, which clearly went around the world. But then you read them an explanation of the events of 9/11, including this. The American government asked the Taliban to hand over Osama bin Laden. They refused. So the Americans and their allies, NATO, attacked the Taliban and came into Afghanistan to look for Osama bin Laden and overthrow the Taliban. Did you know about this event, which the foreigners call 9/11? 92% of the Afghan men answered no. 9 years later, they don't have a clue why the American troops are there.
Yeah, it's a startling statistic, and I think should concern everyone. And I think what's happened over the years is everyone assumed that the people who were there before them had explained 9/11 and the reasons for the presence of the American and the NATO troops there. I suppose the good news about it is it's easily fixable.
Easily fixable. How, though? And help me out. You've lived in Afghanistan for 5 years. Whose fault is this? Is it President Karzai supposed to be saying, hey, the Americans are here as our friend? Is it the military when they go into these towns and try to win people over to try to do the education? The State Department usually provides the diplomatic support for something like this. Who dropped the ball?
One of the problems we've got now is the only actors who are really on the ground in southern Afghanistan are the military, and it's primarily American military actors. So I think in the short term, we're going to have to use military actors to fill in this gap. But one of the other things that reports showed is the military, the surge, which is, you can clearly see it now in southern Afghanistan, there's been a dramatic change in the landscape. They need to be properly supported, not only by a proper political explanation and narrative, but by real positive impacts in the daily lives of the Afghans in these villages where we're prosecuting our war. And that's another thing our research revealed, that that's not happening.
I want to touch on one more number in this context and then a question. Why do you think the foreigners are here? For violence and destruction, 31%. Helping Afghans in rebuilding Afghanistan, 25%. Only 4% say they're there to provide peace and security. I know you don't like to talk about private meetings at the White House with administration officials, but do they get the depth of their communication problem?
They're seeing things that need to be done and need to be addressed to support the surge. And I think the message we want people to get is these problems we're seeing, the need for positive impacts in their lives and the need to fill in these blanks in the political narrative, they can be fixed, and that is necessary to support the surge. Otherwise, the surge will have been wasted.
You've been there for 5 years. Do you see more Taliban now than 3 or 4 years ago? Is the security situation better, especially for a woman living in Afghanistan? It has to be pretty dicey.
When I first went there, it was relatively safe. I could travel just about anywhere I wanted, and now it is very difficult to travel around. As I said, though, we're seeing the surge on the ground. It's really gratifying to see them there. They're doing a good job. I think we've had a strategy, we, the West, have had a strategy of really trying to build up the Afghan government. And in that way, we've sort of neglected our direct relationship with the Afghan people. And I would just like to say on behalf of the Afghan people, you know, they're not getting the benefit of everything that we're doing in Afghanistan. You know, the average Afghan living in the village doesn't have a job, doesn't have food to feed his family.
Are we not doing it right, or is Karzai so corrupt it's not reaching the people?
Let's say it's a combination of these two factors. Is the government's not able or not willing to deliver? And for various reasons, we've not been in the villages doing what we need to do for them. It's not just because they're deserving of some support from us because we're prosecuting our war in their village. It's good politics for us. It's grassroots politics. They have to feel that their future is a better future aligned with the West and our security interests, which means no Taliban and al-Qaeda, rather than a future aligned with the Taliban and al-Qaeda. So, you know, a good example of that is the United States of America is providing electricity in southern Afghanistan. The Afghan people don't know that. We have to make that clear. A future with us, aligned with our security interests, means the lights are on. So I think there's a lot more we can do directly with the Afghan people to build that relationship and solidify that, not just for the short term, but for the medium term and the long term.
As we have this conversation, the American people, understandably, are tired of this war. It's been 9 years. About 6 in 10 now oppose it. Much of that opposition comes from the fact, though, and I found this out last year, I traveled to all 50 states, and I always ask people, why are we still there? They couldn't come up with a very good answer. Some said, oh, 9/11, but there was no depth to the answer. They didn't quite understand it. In your numbers, is there any doubt in your mind what the people of Afghanistan think will happen if the security situation were to collapse again?
We asked this, and this is Afghan men, so sort of the most interesting cohort. We asked them, if the Taliban return to control Afghanistan, will al-Qaeda return? 80% of them said yes, they will. We followed that up with a question. If al-Qaeda returns to Afghanistan, will they use Afghanistan again as a base to attack the West? 72% of this cohort said yes. So their opinion is, obviously there's a serious risk. If we let Afghanistan, southern Afghanistan, go back to Taliban control, Taliban will return and al-Qaeda will return and use it as a base again to attack the West. So if for those who think about withdrawing or pulling back or letting the Taliban take control of southern Afghanistan again, it's a huge gamble, and it's not a gamble that people of southern Afghanistan think is a very good one.
Fascinating study. Noreen MacDonald, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.